Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So the hypocrisy and the meltdown from game journalists like these people on Fanbyte and in other websites is very hilarious, and it is totally hypocritical. So politics are not good unless they are what we adhere to. And Far Cry is getting a lot of criticism from these journalists because it doesn't adhere to what they believe in. It doesn't serve the current narrative that some people from some political factions are trying to force. And let's be totally honest here, I don't like Ubisoft. I'm not even a fan of Far Cry games. I don't really play them a lot. I have played a little of them, but I don't really care. Because Ubisoft is this company that puts microtransactions in a very heavy way in their games. And because they are a company like EA, that try to copy and paste games and just change very few things to make a game look like something new, where in fact it's just the same game. For example, Assassin's Creed Origins to Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the game mechanics were almost the same, just the setting was a little bit different. But nonetheless, I still have to call out these game journalists because they are total hypocrites, and because they cherry pick what they want and they want to force a certain narrative. So in this article here, they say portrayals of Latino. So we're not going to change language because it contains something that you don't like. Characters in 2020 video games already have me tired. Okay, so look at the amount of hypocrisy in this article, and it's very hilarious. So the very first sentence contradicts the whole reason why this person wrote this article, and it's totally mind-boggling that these people are trying to make us think that they are really not about politics, or in fact they are just opposed to the things that they don't like. The article says, I don't like jumping the gun with my assumptions about video games enough to write articles about them before they're released, but that's what you're already doing here. You're already writing a shit article about the game that you haven't played. And you game journalists, when people criticized The Last of Us Part 2 story, you were telling people, oh, you didn't play the game. You have to play it to experience what it's like. And nonetheless, you are criticizing a game that you haven't played, that you haven't seen. But yeah, because of your shitty identity politics, you're already taking a stance. So with you, it's always, if a game doesn't adhere to what I believe in, it's bad. And look at what they said here. After all, The Last of Us Part 2, the game with possibly the most deceptive and fairly off-putting marketing I have seen, has become my favorite game of all time. So someone whose favorite game of all time is The Last of Us Part 2 is trying to tell us that this game, Far Cry 6, is political and bad. Whereas the amount of identity politics in The Last of Us Part 2 is astoundingly high. But because they are the identity politics that you are adhering to, it's a good game, it's the favorite game of all time for you. However, a game in a series like Far Cry, which is notorious for controversy in regards to its politics, especially racial. So look at these words here. It very clearly shows the stance of the writer. Taking place in a Latino, it's not the word that you wrote there. It doesn't exist in any English dictionary whatsoever. I'm not even a native speaker of English. It's not even my second language, but I can tell you with absolute certainty that this word that you wrote there doesn't exist in the language. Far Cry 6 has already given enough information for me to be concerned. The people who criticize The Last of Us Part 2 because of the leaks and because of the story, the way the game was written, they're bad. But you're right, even though that you're only building your opinion on very little information, there are even no leaks at all, and just a trailer. However, I'm not inclined to give Ubisoft the benefit of the doubt. So, yeah, it's very clear. When, as a result of an overwhelming amount of allegations about harassment and misconduct at the company's various studios, Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot is only now deciding to address the fact that Ubisoft's all-white male editorial department, look you dumbass, it's all about meritocracy. If the people who are the best are all white or all black or all Latino or wherever their identity is, are deserving to be in that place, then so be it. But for you, you dumbass, you hypocrite, just like BAFTA, you want quote-unquote diversity in the editorial department, and you don't want meritocracy, and you don't want people who deserve to be in a place to be there. So they should be judged upon their color and their sexuality and their religion and whatnot. So I'm not going to read all of this here because you know very clearly the stance of the writer here. And let's look at another article from another shitty website, at least as far as I can see from this article. They might have some good articles there, but when they include their shitty identity politics in there, I'm going to call them shitty. So the title says, "We don't need another decade of Far Cry." And I have highlighted a few things here. All the while the game spoon feeds you a narrative that is topical but toothless. Sure, it references current events or hints at profundity, but ultimately the game's narrative leaves you unchallenged and unchanged in your worldview. So games that spoon feed you their identity politics that are not what you call your worldview, so you're assuming other people's worldview, how they see the world, and you're assuming that the people see the world the same way as Ubisoft sees it. And you're calling this spoon feeding, whereas in a game like The Last of Us Part 2, it's not spoon feeding really, isn't it? The former title seems to have a lot to say about racial inequality, but actually just serves to reinforce the status quo. So the terms that these people use here can be very easily qualified as social justice warrior, identity politics, the status quo, the system, all of that shit. They are not willing to have a real conversation, but they are just branding people, and they are telling you that your worldview is such and such, and assuming what people think or feel is the worst thing, in my opinion. Another thing here, for Far Cry 4 to have the goal to stumble into struggle for liberation and paint their oppressors as ultimately sympathetic is absurd. So you can see here that this writer of this article is very clearly biased against the Far Cry games in such a manner that they don't really care to hide it. They don't even claim objectivity at all. They're just there to try to inject their toxic ideas in there. The game bends over backwards to redeem Far Cry 5 Joseph Seed because he is estranged from his son, but completely damns Mickey Lou for daring to try and survive in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. And all of this again is just taking your opinion and putting it on a game. There are other elements to Ubisoft games, namely a pattern of colonialist sympathy and fascist whitewashing that are worth calling out. So you see here, again, it's all identity politics. It's all white man is bad and others are the victim. I'm not even a white person, but I can tell you for sure that when you label people in these categories, X is good, Y is bad, you're already losing because you're overgeneralizing things. If a game has a white male character, it must be this. And if it has another character from another ethnicity or gender or whatever, then it must be that. And here the writer is trying to blatantly cancel Ubisoft because they don't agree with the games that they give their audiences. But from where I stand, Far Cry 6 looks like the latest in a long line of games that have been fundamentally identical in their politics. So bravo to them, because they're actually very consistent and they're not hypocrites and they're not bending the knee to the current situation and to the narrative that fits the most. I think that's really good if a game or a game company doesn't bend the knee and doesn't shift and be hypocritical and try to appease whoever is the winner, quote unquote. And the writer here is mixing the things that should be criticized about Ubisoft, like microtransactions and all, with their identity politics. So when you mix things, you're not really making a case for yourself. I don't like Ubisoft, but I'm not going to say I don't like it because of its politics or identity politics, but I don't like it because it doesn't give originality like it used to do, and it has a lot of microtransactions in its games that I don't like. From where I stand, I really don't have an interest in financially enabling an abusive company to keep rehearsing the same expired kid cuisine for another 10 years. Yeah, don't buy their games if you don't like them. It's totally fine. But your call to boycott certain companies isn't better than the call to boycott other companies that other people don't like. And in fact, I find it morally more consistent to call out a company like Activision Blizzard because they bent the knee to China rather than Ubisoft because they have ideas that I don't like. And from where I stand, there are more interesting things happening in other corners of the industry that are worth supporting and propping up. So why don't you tell us who are those, and we will see who you are supporting, because I'm quite sure who you want to talk about here, but I'm not going to assume. Maybe that's not the case for you. Yeah, it's not the case for me. Maybe this time you think will be the time that Ubisoft does something different. Maybe you figure if you keep buying their games, they'll have a financial incentive to take more risk and to stop kowtowing to the status quo. And guess what? I think if anything, I would really urge players to buy Ubisoft games. If it comes down to Ubisoft being a social justice warrior game company, I'd rather buy their games that enforce quote-unquote the status quo, because people like you are going to make the game industry a hell of identity politics, and you're going to remove all kinds of variety and diversity that the game industry actually has, and you will just enforce your identity politics, force companies to say that X character is gay or Y character is trans. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more. What do you think about this mess? Do you think that Ubisoft really deserves to be criticized for the choices that they make in their games in terms of story? Leave your comments down below, and I will talk to you again soon. Have a good one.